The Amazing Spider-Man franchise never really did get off the ground, did it? It started with a lot of hatred already being directed at it for daring to not be Spider-Man 4, with this hate only furthered with the decision to have The Amazing Spider-Man copy a lot of plot points from the first Raimi movie. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 attempted to be something bigger and different, but audiences didn't really take too kindly to their choices, to put it lightly, and this huge movie was actually meant to be the start of several huge movies that would have formed a cohesive cinematic universe to rival the MCU. So, what if it happened? Sony decided to follow a phase-style plan for their new cinematic universe that had been laid out for them by a man named Juan Capde. He recommended that they plan their universe out and model it after the MCU-style phases. Sony compiled together a brain trust who would serve as producers and occasionally directors on all future Amazing Spider-Man projects following The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This would include Amy Pascal, Avi Arad, Matt Tolmach, Mark Webb, Alex Kurtzman, Roberto Orci, Jeff Pinkner, and Drew Goddard. Our story begins with the Amazing Spider-Man Kraven. It would be an interquel set between the events of the first two movies. Peter would still be in his senior year of high school and would still be dating Gwen Stacy. Now in this movie, Peter would start feeling the guilt about dating Gwen, despite the promise that he made to Captain Stacy at the end of the first movie. And he apparently would have broken up and gotten back together with Gwen at least once in this movie, because yeah, we didn't see that enough in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. No, we need more of that. So now meanwhile, the main villains would have been Chris Cooper's Norman Osborn and Kraven the Hunter, who might have been played by Shane West. Norman would be dying from the Osborn family curse, and he would hire Kraven to track down and capture Spider-Man, because he's convinced that his blood would help to cure him of his disease. Kraven succeeds at capturing Spider-Man, and Norman discovers his secret identity. He uses Peter's blood, only for it to turn him into an Ultimate Spider-Man version of Green Goblin, who Spider-Man would then defeat. Norman would retreat and return to his human form, but finds his disease has accelerated. So he calls for Harry to return to New York, thus setting up the events of TASM 2. And this fight with the Green Goblin would have helped to explain why Peter refused to give Harry his blood in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, since he'd already seen what it did to his father. Following directly after the events of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Peter is going through the motions as Spider-Man because he's not over Gwen's death. He begins attending college, where we're introduced to his professor, Miles Warren, who would have been played by Gary Oldman, as well as his new best friend, Ned Leeds, played by Justin Chatwin. Meanwhile, he also starts working more at the Daily Bugle, where we reunite with J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, hell yeah, and are introduced to Eddie Brock, played by Finn Wittrock, and Betty Brant, played by Olivia Wilde. Harry Osborn, meanwhile, would escape from prison and discover that his father Norman is actually secretly still alive, but he's now living as just a head in a jar, yeah, that's weird, and he goes by the name of King Goblin. Now, the Osborns would have formed a team known as the Sinister Six, which seemingly would have consisted of Harry as the Green Goblin, as well as Shane West Kraven the Hunter, Paul Giamatti's Rhino, Zachary Quinto as Mysterio, Matthew McConaughey as the Vulture, and Christoph Waltz as Dr. Octopus. Peter finds himself unable to handle this higher crime rate, and he follows his Aunt May's advice to attend grief counseling sessions. There he meets Mary Jane Watson, played by Shailene Woodley. Peter would find himself attracted to her, but unable to act on his feelings due to the pain of Gwen's death. Peter, during a fight with the Sinister Six, would have become bonded with the Venom symbiote, which influences Peter to use his own blood to bring Gwen Stacy back to life. However, his blood combined with the Venom symbiote causes her to return as Carnage. So now Spider-Man and the Sinister Six would be forced to team up and defeat her, and Peter is forced to watch her die again. However, he does get to talk to the real Gwen Stacy again before she dies, and gain some kind of closure on her death. Thus, he does find the confidence to move on and pursue Mary Jane romantically. Now, at the end of the movie, Peter would remove the Venom symbiote, but it ends up attaching to Eddie Brock, who is trying to take pictures of him. Also, the Carnage symbiote managed to survive and bonds with a serial killer named Cletus Cassidy, who would have been played by Alan Tudyk. Eddie initially becomes antagonistic under the influence of the Venom symbiote, and he actually comes to blows with Spider-Man. Eddie's on and off again relationship with Betty Brant would have been put to the ultimate test in this movie, and in the end, he and Spider-Man are forced to work together against Carnage, with Venom becoming a regular ally for Peter going forward. Kraven the Hunter would somehow betray the Sinister Six before fleeing to the Savage Land, a hidden oasis in the middle of Antarctica that's home to the world's last remaining dinosaurs. The Sinister Six would then blackmail Spider-Man by using his secret identity against him in order to gain his support in tracking Kraven down. Along the way, they'd fight dinosaurs, make unlikely friendships, and fight a giant alien named Gog that Kraven raises his personal attack dog. This movie would have introduced the Sandman, played by Tom Hardy, and would have somehow featured Peter and Harry making amends with each other. Felicia Hardy, who would have been in the previous movies and continued her romance storyline with Harry Osborn, would have had her past come back to haunt her. Basically, it would turn out that she's the daughter of a famous cat burglar named Walter Hardy, who would have been played by Kurt Russell. Felicia, when she discovers this, would leave her family and become a secretary at Oscorp, but now her father has turned his life around and become a police officer, only to be killed by Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, for refusing to go back to life as a criminal. Felicia would then become Black Cat and would team up with Green Goblin, Spider-Man, and Venom to take down Kingpin and his massive criminal empire. This movie would tell the story of a woman named Sofia Savlanova, the daughter of a famous mercenary whose home would get burned to the ground by vengeful criminals, thus killing Sofia's mother. Sofia would then grow up to be trained as a mercenary and become Silver Sable, who would have been played by Rose Byrne. She takes over her father's mercenary group, the Wild Pack, and leads them to New York to take down Mr. Negative and Doc Ock, who are threatening to destroy New York using an interdimensional portal. Spider-Man and Venom would try to stop them, only to get sucked through. The pair would then meet Gwen Stacy, who in this world became Spider-Woman, and Peter was the one who was killed. She and Peter have a really hard time being near each other, but have to remind themselves that they aren't the same people that they fell in love with. Meanwhile, Silver Sable would team up with Black Cat to take down Doc Ock and Mr. Negative, and bring Spider-Man and Venom back to their own Earth, which they do successfully. So now our story cuts ahead several decades to New York in the year of 2099, and we follow a young man named Miguel O'Hara, a geneticist who works at a company named Alchemax. His corrupt boss, Tyler Stone, is his secret biological father, whom his mother had an affair with when she was younger. Stone forces his son to do genetic experimentation on people using animal and insect DNA, which causes them to become monstrous hybrids, and they soon die. When Miguel refuses to do this anymore, Stone actually gets him addicted to a drug that will actually kill the user if they don't get their fix. Miguel ends up curing himself by injecting himself with spider DNA, and thus he becomes Spider-Man. He has to fight against both his own father as well as Morlun, an interdimensional time-traveling vampire, hell-bent on feasting on spider people from throughout history. Miguel would get sucked into a portal that would take him back to the 2010s, where he would meet with Peter Parker Spider-Man. Phase 1's conclusion would easily be the biggest movie yet. Essentially, it would be a live-action Spider-Verse movie consisting of Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2099, Spider-Gwen, Venom, Black Cat, Silver Sable, and the Sinister Six, all teaming up to face Morlun and Carnage in an epic city-wide battle. This movie may have also featured appearances from Spider-Woman, who might have been played by Angelina Jolie, and Spider-Girl, who might have been played by Emmy Rossum. Tobey Maguire was also a rumored candidate for a possible appearance. Nonetheless, this would have been the end of Phase 1 for the Amazing Spider-Man cinematic universe. Dr. Miles Warren, who would have been Peter's college professor since The Amazing Spider-Man 3, would be revealed as a former Oscorp employee that held a faraway crush on Gwen Stacy, and yeah, it's just as creepy as it sounds, believe me. Now, when she died, he tried in vain to clone her several times, and failing this, he would grow to hate and blame Spider-Man even for her death. Thus, he would clone two new Spider-Men to do his bidding, aka Kane Parker and Scarlet Spider. They would have framed Peter for crimes he didn't commit before trying to kill him. However, Scarlet Spider would have a change of heart and assist Spider-Man in defeating Kane. Warren, out of desperation, would turn himself into a human Jackal hybrid, but would still end up being defeated in the end. Coming in after the events of The Amazing Spider-Man Carnage, Spider-Man 2099 would have been stuck in the early 21st century and would be desperate to return to his own time, so he would end up meeting his own grandfather, Tiberius Stone, who he'd have to protect from Scorpion, who's now trying to kill him in order to reset the timeline. While it's never stated if Miguel would make it back to his own time or not, this movie would have explored the moral grayness of whether he should abandon the 2010s, despite them still needing his help, or if he should leave 2099 New York behind to be further terrorized by Alchemax. The overarching plans for Phase 2 were to seemingly set up the idea of Peter Parker retiring as Spider-Man. The Brain Trust hoped to have Spider-Man and MJ married off by the Sinister Six movie. Not to mention, if Andrew Garfield was still in the role by this point, he would have been in his late 30s or early 40s, and thus wouldn't likely want to remain in the role for much longer, hence why Phase 2 would have centered around building up Scarlet Spider to be his successor. Now, other plans would have possibly included a Spider-Woman and/or Spider-Girl movie, further Venom and Sinister Six sequels, and a team-up movie with Black Cat and Silver Sable. Sony, even this far back, were also hoping to eventually make standalone movies based on Morbius and Jackpot. However, as we all know, none of these movies ever saw the light of day. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 disappointed both at the box office and with critics, and after initially planning to continue the Amazing Spider-Man universe anyway, they ultimately saw more profit in another reboot, this time as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with Tom Holland in the lead role. So that is the full story of the cancelled Amazing Spider-Man Cinematic Universe. So what do I think of it? Honestly, there are points of it that I like, but I overall don't like most of their ideas, I'm sorry to say. I think that a lot of it sounds incredibly rushed. A lot of the movies sound like they have way too much going on in them, which tells me that they wouldn't have learned anything from the problems of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I do like some of the ideas, though. Like, I like the idea of doing a prequel movie, because I don't really think that it was in their best interest to move on from Peter in high school so fast. I would have wanted to do another high school Spider-Man movie first, because I thought they killed Gwen too soon. I think that they should have waited to kill Gwen until at least movie number 3, so, even though this would have been movie number 3, but it basically would have been movie number 2. Like, I probably would have watched it in the order of 1 Kraven and then 3, or 1 Kraven and 2, sorry. It's confusing, okay? Give me a break. Also, the idea of movies based off of Spider-Man 2099, like, seriously, what a missed chance. Like, I would have loved to see those movies, honestly, because say what you will about the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but they are stunning movies. So can you imagine what they could do with, like, 2099 New York? Like, with the visuals? Man, that just sounds so, like, such a gorgeous and out there movie, and I really wish we could have gotten it. I really, really do. I mean, same with the Savage Land. Even though I think the Savage Land is kind of a silly idea, I wouldn't deny that I think it would be a really cool location to do a Spider-Man movie. Like, it honestly sounds like it would be really awesome to watch Spider-Man fight dinosaurs. But I still can't deny the issues with this. Like, first of all, I think there's way too much going on in these movies. It sounds like, as I said, they wouldn't have learned anything from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at all. Because all these movies were going to have so much going on. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was going to have, Spider-Man, Mary Jane, the Sinister Six, Felicia Hardy, who's not Black Cat yet, as well as both, the Venom symbiote and Carnage. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, that's so many things. And then they were going to follow that up with, like, a Sinister Six movie? Like, so soon? Like, so I'm sorry. And then they were going to do a Black Cat movie with Green Goblin, Spider-Man, and Venom in it. And then they were going to do a Silver Sable movie that basically wouldn't even be about her. It was going to be basically just about Peter going to this universe where he reunites with Gwen. Like, that was going to be the main focus, whether they tried to make it about Silver Sable or not. That stuff would have completely overshadowed Silver Sable, whether we like it or not. So, like, I just can't help but think that these movies don't seem to understand how to keep their focus on just one or two characters. Like, that's the main issue. They wanted to rush to play catch up with the MCU, and I think that was really to their detriment. Because honestly, I think if they were slow and careful about it, a Spider-Man Cinematic Universe is actually very much achievable. I think that, just based on all the characters I mentioned in this video, people should be able to see there's plenty of characters to work with in a universe like this. So honestly, I think that there would be plenty of potential. I just don't think they went about it the right way at all. Now, I should also mention about Jackal, I don't think he would translate very well to the big screen at all, even with Gary Oldman. Like, Gary Oldman is one of the best actors on the planet, I'm not going to say otherwise, but I don't even think he could make that work. Like, people hated Jackal in the comics. I don't think it would go that much better in the movies, especially because it would be arguably even worse, because Gwen would be even younger. Gwen would have been like 18 or 19 when she died, and obviously Gary Oldman's far older than that, so that already would have raised a red flag. But then you have to remember that she would have been dead for a good while in the franchise by this point, so it just feels really shoehorned in to say, oh yeah, he always had these feelings, he was always destined to, you know, be a villain, like when it was this long ago that she died. Like if that had been like the immediate reaction to her death, like that would make a bit more sense, but they were gonna wait until like movie number 11 or 12 to do that, and I'm just like, why would you wait so long? Why would you wait like 10 movies to do that storyline? That's just so bizarre. Not to mention the idea of having Scarlet Spider be Peter's not love interest, obviously, successor, I meant to say. I have mixed feelings on it. I like Scarlet Spider. I think he would be a worthy successor, but I just can't help but feel, why wouldn't they just do it with Miles Morales? Like, it would be so much easier. They wouldn't have to do the clone storyline at all. It would just be a lot easier. Like, Miles Morales existed by this point. He debuted in 2011. So, like, and for some reason, his name never ever popped up. Like, you might have noticed, I never mentioned him in one of these movies. That's because he was never being planned. They never even considered him to be in one of these movies. And I just don't understand why. Like, there's so much potential in doing that, but they didn't even think about it? Like, this universe has a lot of issues. I think it could have been good. I think that there's a lot of talent in that brain trust that they had formed. But, you know, and these are really good characters. And, you know, they had many movies planned, but it sounds like they were really rushing things. There was going to be way too many things going on, and some of the storylines just would have been problematic. Like the stuff with Jackal, and bringing Gwen back to life as Carnage, I'm sure would have been controversial. And, you know, I just can't help but feel like some of these movies would not have hit the right notes. In fact, most of them I don't think would have hit the right notes. I think Spider-Man 2099 would have been a guaranteed good, hopefully. At least it would have been a stunning visual experience, and I'm sure it would have made, you know, money despite itself. And I do think that the Carnage movie sounds pretty good, even if it's weird to advertise it as a Carnage movie when it's about the Spider-Verse. But, you know, overall, I do think this is a universe with potential, and it had good talent, but I feel like the universe as the one I just told is flawed and would have needed a lot of tweaking. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think of the Amazing Spider-Man Cinematic Universe in the comments down below. Make sure to share this video with all of your friends on all your various social media platforms. Give this video a thumbs up, and share, I already said that. Make sure to give me more what if recommendations in the comments down below, I meant to say. And follow me on my Instagram account, Rinzler_Productions, and I'll see all of you in the next video.